Yes, yeah, got it.
Which story?
The one, is he near you in Humberside?
Oh, he's West Yorkshire.
Oh, it's mental.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Proper mental.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them though, aren't there, really?
Has he got him?
No, he's the co-chair with me of the party group in Haemophilia. Don't ask.
So he's against it as well?
Yeah, we're all against it.
Don't stop in and say I'm all in favour.
Trying to rattle through as quickly as possible. We'll give you a minute to settle. You okay? Okay, we move on to next, we move on to the next debate. Diana Johnson on haemophilia care. Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Weir, and I'm delighted to serve under you today in this debate. And I'm very pleased indeed to have secured this debate, and I know that this particular issue is of interest to a number of honourable members from all political parties across the House. And I'd also like to pay tribute to the Minister, who I know has taken a keen interest in this area, and I certainly have had a number of meetings with her on this issue. I am only a little disappointed that this debate is a short debate today, and therefore I can only raise in headline figures and issues. There are many issues to raise, but I'm just going to try and concentrate on a few. And I just wanted to start by paying tribute to my constituent, Glenn Wilkinson, and his family, who came to see me first in 2010 to tell me their story and to raise the scandal of how he and thousands of others had been treated by the contaminated blood products that he'd received as part of his treatment as a haemophiliac. There are two main parts to what I want to say today. I want to say something about the ongoing treatment for haemophiliacs, and secondly I want to say something about the care, support and treatment which is offered to those who've contracted viruses such as HIV and hepatitis C through NHS treatment for haemophilia. I also want to pay tribute at the start to the work of the Haemophiliac Society and campaign groups such as Tainted Blood and Manor House over many years, and also the work of the Newcastle Initiative, which was born out of a multidisciplinary workshop on haemophilia care, which was held in Newcastle in the autumn of 2010. So turning first of all to treatment, Mr. Weir, I want to concentrate on the need to ensure that the care and treatment of people affected by bleeding disorders is addressed in the NHS reforms which are currently before Parliament. The haemophilia community has been the subject of what Lord Winston described in his evidence to the Archer inquiry as the worst treatment disaster in the NHS's history. There has been much progress in treatment for haemophilia over the past decade. However, like much else, this is now under threat from the Health and Social Care Bill, and I'll go on to explain why I think that. Standards of care vary considerably around the country, with the risk that the new commissioning arrangements for specialist services will result in a levelling down rather than levelling up in haemophilia care. And the reason I say this is because, as I understand it currently, haemophilia services are commissioned by 10 regional specialist commissioning groups, with funds pooled from their constituency PCTs. The Department of Health has also injected extra funding for haemophilia care, rising to £88 million per annum between 2003 and 2006, to finance the provision of recombinant rather than plasma-derived clotting factors to all patients. This money remains important to the quality of care, but has more recently been subsumed into PCT's baseline budgets. And I would seek reassurance from the Minister this afternoon that the money provided for this and now absorbed into the baseline budget will still be available for haemophilia care post the NHS reforms. Now, in place of the 10 SCGs, which I just mentioned, specialist services will become the responsibility, as I understand it, of the NHS Commissioning Board from April 2013. This could, in theory, mean the spread of best practice across England, but equally, under financial pressure, there is a danger that standards could, as I say, be levelled down. I'd also like to raise with the Minister about the question of where responsibility for haemophilia policy will actually sit in the future. Because of the contaminated blood scandal, the Department of Health has taken a leading role in the development of haemophilia policy. It's unclear whether this role will be maintained following the passage of the Health and Social Care Bill, or whether all responsibility will pass to the NHS Commissioning Board. And it would again be helpful if the Minister could set out her understanding of where responsibility for haemophilia care will sit. Also, will the twice-yearly liaison meetings between the Department and the Haemophilia Society, established in direct response to the Archer Inquiry's recommendations that a statutory committee should be established to advise Government on clinical, financial and other provisions for people with haemophilia, actually continue? And there is also a call for a new national policy statement on haemophilia care to replace Health Service Guidance 93/30, which I understand is now nearly 20 years old and no longer reflects best practice. And can the Minister confirm whether this will actually be happening at this stage? Does the Minister agree on the need to support the development of robust haemophilia networks to combine the best of local care with access to tertiary expertise 24 hours a day? And, for example, only 15% of respondents were aware of having been offered a care plan in a recent survey by the Haemophilia Society, and that report was called Fit for the Future, Haemophilia Services in the New NHS. And in both that report and in the Newcastle initiative, Learning from the Past to Inform the Future, it was found that standards of treatment and care were generally high, which is very encouraging, but that access to provision of associated services, including dentistry, physiotherapy and psychological support, required significant improvement. The reports also concluded that patients must be given a comprehensive care plan, that they're able to access home treatment and be involved in all decisions about their treatment. And these goals are partially but not consistently fulfilled under the current system. And of course we'd like to see that consistency across the whole of the country. Finally, all governments in relation to treatment have said that lessons have been learned from the contaminated blood scandal and of the need to maintain the highest standards of care to avoid any repetition. Can the Minister just confirm? Yes, I'm very happy to give one.
Jim Shannon.
Beginning with, congratulate bringing this matter to Westminster Hall. Does the Honourable Lady also have concerns with the level of support that is given to those who are haemophilics who have had contaminated blood with HIV and hepatitis C? And does the Honourable Lady feel that there needs to be an additional level of care and assistance given to those who suffer through no of their own, but it's been done through the blood drawn by their own means?
I'm going to come on actually to deal with some of the issues around the support, the financial support that's available to individuals who have had contaminated blood products and now have HIV or hepatitis C, because I think that's obviously an important issue that we need to address. Just finishing this first section, which is just about treatment around haemophilia, Mr Weir, I just wanted to finish with, can the Minister confirm that there should be continued research to support what I was just saying about the need to make sure that the contaminated blood scandal never happens again? So continued research into, for example, sterilisation in areas with high risk of variant CJD contamination. Now, if I can turn to the second part of my speech, which is relating very much to the contaminated blood issue. In recent months, along with many other members of Parliament, I've been raising the issue of care and support offered to victims of the NHS contaminated blood scandal. And this is how it's been come to be known over the past 30 years as contaminated blood scandal. My Hull North constituent, Glenn Wilkinson, has campaigned tirelessly for proper support for those who have received contaminated blood products, either as part of treatment as a haemophiliac, or as well for those individuals who've received contaminated blood products in other medical treatments, such as a blood transfusion in childbirth. Now, this week, Glenn, along with other campaigners, has established a new pressure group, the Contaminated Blood Campaign. The treatment of people in particular who contracted hepatitis C from NHS-administered blood products has been particularly unfair, and many of those people have unfortunately already died. The campaign that Glenn set up is also fighting to have an independent public inquiry on the same lines as the report in Ireland and the Scottish Penrose inquiry, which I believe is due to conclude shortly. Yes, I will, yes.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Lady for giving way and congratulate her on supporting this excellent and timely debate. Obviously, I work with her very closely on the APPG for contaminated blood and haemophilia. And maybe with raising the issue of the new contaminated blood campaign, which a constituent has been instrumental in setting up, maybe this afternoon it would be good if the Minister could maybe make a pledge or a promise to maybe meet this new campaign and discuss some of these issues and move forward. I know the Minister's regularly met with some of the victims of the contaminated blood scandal, and this would be a good opportunity to pledge to meet this new campaign and keep this good communication going.
Anne Johnson.
I'm grateful for that intervention, and I would also like to pay tribute to the honourable member's involvement and hard work on behalf of the all-party group on haemophilia and contaminated blood. And I think he makes an excellent point in asking the Minister whether she will find time. I know she has a very busy diary, but in the past she has made time to meet with victims and members of Parliament. So I hope that that will also be happening in the future as well. Just returning to where we were in terms of compensation for those who've been infected by contaminated blood products, the Macfarlane Trust was set up in 1988 for people infected with HIV, and then in 2004 the previous Labour government established the Skipton Fund, and the incoming government in 2010 undertook to have a review of the support available to individuals. And there was some progress on this, but unfortunately still there are problems with the system that has been set up. In particular, the issue that I'm very concerned about is the government have introduced now a two-stage payment for hepatitis C, but the criteria for determining the second stage is still fraught with difficulties for many individuals. And as I understand it, only about 20% of those people with hepatitis C are eligible for assistance under the second stage payment, and I think that still needs to be looked at. Now, my constituent, Glenn, has produced evidence that removing the artificial distinction between stage 1 and stage 2 could be achieved and would cost about £22 million, which I'm led to believe could be reallocated from underspends in other compensatory pockets of money that are available. I just want to finally turn to welfare reform, because I think that this again is an issue for this group of people. We've had a lot of discussion in the House of Commons about the welfare reform impact on cancer patients, but I do think there's a special case to be made for those people with hepatitis C. I will, yes.
Hoggins.
Again, I can join other honourable members in congratulating my honourable friend. She speaks powerfully for her constituent, but also for my constituents today, Fred Bates and Peter Mossman, and they'll be very grateful for that. Isn't the core theme of her speech, which she's made very powerfully this afternoon, one of trust? The trust of this community was shattered by their experience. This Minister is trying hard to restore that confidence, and that's important work she's doing, but isn't it the case that our constituents with haemophilia who've been infected with hepatitis C and other infections, that their needs should always now come first and not last as a result of the dreadful experience that they've had?
Anne Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Weir. And I think my honourable friend makes a very powerful point there about trust and about the need for us all to work together now to make sure that this group do not suffer any further and get the compensation and support that they are clearly due. Just returning to the hepatitis C sufferers, I just want to concentrate on those for a minute, because I believe that they will be penalised unfairly because of the government's plans on the welfare reform bill. And I have raised with the Minister in the debate in October 2010 about whether it was possible for people to be passported onto the new system who had hepatitis C and HIV. The Haemophiliac Society have also raised the question about people with fluctuating medical conditions, such as bleeding disorders, and particularly those with the viral infections from contaminated blood products. People suffering from these fluctuating medical conditions, like haemophilia, HIV and hepatitis C, tend to have good days and bad days. And the Haemophilia Society recommended that the work capability assessments be suspended for people with fluctuating conditions until Professor Harrington had considered the representations of the Disability Benefits Consortium. Many people living with hepatitis C in particular have been placed in the work-related activity group of the new Employment and Support Allowance, rather than the support group category where benefits will continue indefinitely. This has two consequences. Firstly, it means that sufferers will have to have annual assessments. It also means that after 12 months their benefits will become means tested. This is effectively penalising a person for prudent behaviour and hard work when they were well enough to be in employment. People who are diagnosed with hepatitis C know that they are unlikely to be able to continue working until a normal retirement age. And further, people currently have to wait up to 11 months for a tribunal appeal. It's to be noted that appeals for hepatitis C sufferers have a particularly high rate of success. Automatically moving contaminated blood product victims into the support group would save the patient stress and the government money. And just... I will very briefly.
Thank the Honourable Lady for our graciousness in giving way. Many haemophiliacs have suffered from poverty and discrimination as well as a result of the contaminated blood. Does she feel that for that reason that the government needs to urgently address those who are still left suffering from this malady?
Anna Johnson.
I think the Honourable Member makes that point very powerfully, and I would also just like to quote from the Fit for the Future report I referred to earlier, when an individual was asked what could be done to improve the quality of life of that person, and they said, I think the most obvious thing to do would be to be spared the ordeal of having to battle with the government for financial security and not have to justify my right to sickness benefit. So in conclusion, let's keep working on compensation and related issues to improve life in the longer term for haemophiliacs and all the innocent victims of contaminated blood products. But in the shorter term, with the NHS and the welfare reforms, let's at least make sure these people's lives don't get any worse.
Thank you very much, Mr Weir, and can I say what a pleasure it is to serve under you this afternoon, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Lady for tabling this debate on haemophilia care. And it's an issue I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about. I would also like to thank her particularly for her comments about the contact that we've had. I will continue to keep in contact with her and in touch with her, and indeed many other members of this House who continue to highlight the specific issues that their constituents suffer. I know Glenn Wilkinson, and there are others, some of them not still with us, who have worked tirelessly on this issue. And I was interested to hear the news about the new campaign. I will, of course, meet with them, as I will continue to do. In fact, Mr Weir, it's an opportunity to say that Whitehall can be a very distant place, actually, from the rest of the population. And I, as a minister, and indeed all ministers should, use the opportunity that other members of this House give us, backbench members and opposition members, to actually make sure that we stay in touch and don't get insulated from what's actually happening in people's lives. I wish I could make up for what has happened. This is a very long and very sad saga. I can only do what I can do starting from here, and I'm also aware of the fact that it will never really be quite enough, because I can't turn the clock back. But what does matter is that we keep that contact going. She specifically asked about future commissioning arrangements and specialised services for haemophilia and other related bleeding disorders, as she rightly says, are currently commissioned at a regional level by specialist commissioning groups. We are working with the NHS to produce a list of specialised services to go in a new set of regulations for the NHS Commissioning Board. At the moment, we're not producing a final list, but I can say that a list of services currently set out in the Specialist Services National Definition Set. It is quite extraordinary what the names the Department of Health and others come up with, will form a basis for the Commissioning Board's final list. And I expect that we will be in a position to announce that list of services in the coming months, at which point, obviously, the list will be subject to some consultation. She rightly states the possibility that this would be an opportunity to share best practice. I get slightly frustrated when you hear some areas doing things so well and other areas not sort of doing it as well or not adopting that sort of best practice. She voiced her concerns and fears that this could be a moment when services are levelled down. I was born an optimist, actually, Mr. Weir. But I do think that there will be an opportunity to share best practice. And certainly from the department's point of view and the financial arrangements, actually for this particular group of people who are affected by contaminated blood, will stay as an issue for the Department of Health. But obviously the services. What matters is that we get that best practice shared. She mentioned care plans. In fact, as somebody who trained as a nurse and worked in the NHS for 25 years, I get slightly frustrated because everybody should have a care plan and everybody should be involved in that care plan. And that care plan should involve actually all the different agencies. And it might be housing from the local authority, it might be social care from social services, it might be the voluntary sector as well, for people who are maybe very isolated. A number of agencies who actually can improve the quality of life and ensure people's lives are fulfilling and meaningful. Today, obviously, treatment for haemophilia is much improved. But just on a point of blood safety, which she did indeed bring up, some haemophilia patients still need to be treated with products that have been manufactured from human plasma, but those products are manufactured under very strict safeguards. Many haemophilia patients are now treated with synthetic products, and both types of products are extremely safe. And I think the lessons learned, and if you like, the sort of shadow of what went on all those years ago continues to hang over us. And I think everybody involved with the safety of blood products. Synthetic and plasma-derived clotting factors are procured nationally by the department, with commissioners and clinical and patient representatives involved in a very early stage. And that means that the NHS buy products that are not only cost-effective, but that reflect what patients and doctors actually need. In turn, manufacturers and suppliers can better understand what matters to people who actually use those products, because at the end of the day, that is what should matter to us. To further improve patient involvement, the Department of Health has brought the Haemophilia Alliance into discussion on all the issues that affect haemophilia patients, and the Alliance, as she well knows, is made up of patients, clinicians and other professionals involved in haemophilia care, and I'm very grateful for those that give up the time to involve in that so positively. Just out of interest, a decontamination research funding initiative worth about 2.4 million over 4 years was announced in 2011, and that will address the decontamination of surgical instruments, improving the effectiveness of washer disinfectors and exploring contamination and novel technologies approaches to the decontamination of endoscopes. These projects will also have wider applicability to both human prion diseases such as CJD and other healthcare associated infections. And there are still issues that are unresolved. There are still issues around which there are not the technologies yet proven to be effective. So there will continue to be money in research until we're absolutely sure that we have done all we can. I will just turn to the issue of those people that were infected with hepatitis C and HIV, and of course the significant effect that's had on the families. And I think with an issue like this, we forget the fact that there's this massive ripple effect. A ripple effect not just with the immediate family, but also more distant family. And as she knows, in January 2010, the Secretary of State announced that we would provide additional support, not just for haemophilia patients, but it's available to anybody who is infected with HIV or hepatitis C by NHS blood transfusion. And as she knows, she's very familiar with it, as I'm sure other members are, the annual payment for HIV linked to inflation, introducing a similar payment for those most seriously affected by hepatitis C, and increasing the value of the lump sum. And I could go on, making 300,000 available over 3 years for counselling services. And it's quite interesting for me to look at the uptake of those sort of things. You know when you've hit the target, if you like, but you actually see the uptake happening. And it's important, it's so important that I take the opportunity to continue to get that feedback. And there's a combination of fixed and discretionary payments which provides flexibility to enable payments to be tailored to meet individual personal needs. I know that there is concern about insufficient support available to people who developed hepatitis C, and I'm referring particularly here to the Skipton Fund Stage 1 recipients. The scientific and clinical advice we received during the review we conducted in autumn 2010 didn't support regular annual payments to everybody infected with hepatitis C, many of whom, and I was delighted to hear somebody who's campaigned very actively to hear that he had actually cleared the virus. New treatments are available, improving the prognosis for some infected patients, but I do know, and she was, I think, at the meeting I had recently, Mr. Weir, I do know that there's still concern about that cut-off. I know that your constituent has worked out the potential cost of removing the distinction between stage 1 and stage 2. But I have to say that the current system for payments for hepatitis C is itself based on expert clinical and scientific review, which continues to support the two-tier system. However, evidence evolves, and you know, it would be a very arrogant minister who stood up here and said that's it forever, because it's terribly important. As I hear about the experience of individual members, constituents, I continue to receive advice, so that what we're doing is relative to the current expertise. I would just like to take the opportunity to apologise to not responding to the Honourable Lady's previous email about my meeting with the expert group. But I was actually delaying the response whilst departmental officials worked out the details of the meeting. I'm pleased to say that I will now be writing to the relevant patient groups, asking them to nominate 2 people, which I think seems about right, to represent them at that meeting. And I think that will be very important. And of course, she's probably still very aware of the Caxton Foundation, which provides support tailored to the needs of those affected. All payments made by the foundation are for the trustees to decide, and I met with the trustees, and their feedback again is very important to see how that is working. The objectives of the charity are laid out in the trust deed, and they're accountable obviously to the charity commissioners, and I don't have any powers to direct them, but again it has to be kept in review. I know the Honourable... Yes, I'm happy to give way briefly.
She mentions the Caxton Foundation. Will she, for the future, take particular notice of the needs of carers? Because it's very important that that fund is in a position to support carers as well as those who are directly affected.
Yes, can I thank the Honourable Gentleman? Absolutely, and this is why that sort of discretionary ability to distribute funds is so important, and he's absolutely right to raise the issue of carers, all too often forgotten. She did raise the issue of the capability assessment, and I would urge her, I mean, she might want a similar debate, particularly on that issue. Of course, health conditions are not automatically a barrier to work, whilst recognising that for some people it is a barrier, and indeed they will never work, and in those cases we must make sure that we support them. It would probably not be right, and it's certainly not in my gift to give automatic exemptions, but as I say, I would urge her to raise that with the Secretary of State and the Minister responsible. And, yeah.
Obviously, the Minister making representations to a fellow Minister is quite powerful, and I wondered whether she'd had an opportunity to do that with her colleagues in the DWP.
Well, as she rightly states, my responsibility is the health and well-being of the populations in my ministerial role, and I will always continue to make representations. And sometimes these things don't happen in the public eye, but they do often go on. Just a word about Lord Penrose's inquiry, and we will give assistance. We won't be commenting on that. I've had a few letters about that. I will comment at the end of that inquiry. The issue as trust has come up. I will finish, Mr. Weir, with just saying that I know that a lot of trust was damaged, and in fact I think it's flavoured a lot of things since then, for the good, but also for the ill, and I think it's extremely difficult. I wouldn't presume to say that I can ever get anybody's trust back for what has happened. Successive governments behind me have done or failed to have done, but I do hope that we will continue to work constructively and with other members of the House to make sure that this group of people gets the help and support